is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host today, Cody Williams, content director at FanSided.com. John Buhler is still not back. Can't wait for him to return, though. I apologize for being a little wonky with the schedule of these episodes. I believe I even missed an episode. I have been feeling under the weather. Understatement. Still feeling under the weather, but wanted to get you guys some content before the draft, an episode before the draft. Again, my brain is I'm cooked. I'm super cooked right now, but we're gonna press on and get it done today. And that's gonna lead us into our first and 15 today, which is playoffs. You kidding me? And we're going to talk about the beef between Indiana defensive coordinator Bryant Haines and Ty Simpson, former Alabama quarterback, about to be a NFL draft pick. Whether that's the first round or not, we'll see. But um, Simpson went on a podcast and basically said that Indiana's defense in the college football playoff was simple. They lined up in the exact same formation every time, and Ty Simpson was looking at it from a perspective of, it seemed like there wasn't much guesswork there as to what the defense was doing. They were pretty clear about it. But then he did go on to compliment them and say that they executed at such a high level that it didn't matter because obviously we know how that game turned out. They executed what they were doing, even if it was predictable, at such a high level. Apparently, Bryant Haines missed that part of the equation, and he went off on Twitter a little bit and angered Alabama Twitter quite a bit. Um, I would say that I probably side with Alabama Twitter a little bit on this, which is not a normal position for me to take, I would say. Having said that, to my point, like Simpson wasn't being derogatory when talking about the Indiana defense. The opposite, honestly. He was being quite complimentary of them. And so for Haynes to go off in the manner that he did and fire off multiple tweets and keep engaging with this stuff, it's a tough look. And I mean, we know Brian Haynes is a good coach. He just won the Royals Award. And he is one of the better defensive coordinators in the country. And that's probably because, yeah, it might look predictable, but they're going to execute. And that's what they did against Alabama. So I don't think anything's going to come of this. I'm sure that there will be bad blood if Indiana and Alabama were to meet at some point, whether that's the college football playoff, whether that's, somewhere down the road, we'll see. But it does seem it does seem like Brian Haynes might have overreacted and may not have watched the entire clip from the podcast or even the entire podcast. But it was entertaining nonetheless. No doubt about that. We love to see some good college football beef in the offseason. That's always a fun thing. But we're going to move on to our second topic. Again, it's going to be a quick show today. I don't feel good, but we're going to run through some stuff. We'll probably be in and out in under 30 minutes. But we're going to move on to the second topic of the day, which is it don't mean enough. In case you missed it, former Georgia wide receiver Zachariah Branch was arrested in Athens after G-Day less than a week before the NFL draft. The charges were obstructing the sidewalk and obstructing a police officer, and the bail was set at $39. Now, when I saw all of that and the charges come out and saying all this, my first thought was, oh God, another Georgia football arrest. But then I looked at the bail, I looked at the charges. Obstructing a sidewalk was not a crime that I was familiar with at the time. And in my mind, I thought to myself, was he just like in the way on the sidewalk? Or is that too dumb? Is that just like the simplest version of this? No, that's actually what happened. Tom Pelissero of NFL Network reported on what actually happened, and obviously they were in downtown Athens, and a police officer asked Zachariah Branch to move out of the way on the sidewalk because he said he was obstructing it. According to the reports, Branch moved slightly, but then not enough and was still obstructing the sidewalk, and then apparently laughed at the cop, and that led to his arrest. I'm just saying, this sounds a whole hell of a lot like someone who may or may not have been wearing a police officer's uniform going on a bit of a power trip here. Now, Will Compton of Bussin' with the Boys did bring up a good point. If you're Zachariah Branch, you do have to be a little smarter than this. And that's not to say he put himself in like a horrible situation. He wasn't, behind the wheel of a car doing 110 miles an hour. He wasn't drinking and driving. There are different things. But you're less than a week before the NFL draft. You are going to be drafted most likely on day two. And when you get to day two and day three of the draft, the margins for what can cause your draft stock to fall are very thin. Very, very thin. That's not to say this is going to cause him to plummet in the draft. I don't think it's that serious. Again, I think this sounds a lot to me like a cop going on a power trip and didn't like being shown up to some degree. Having said that, I do think that we are in a position where if you're preparing for the NFL draft, maybe don't be out in downtown Athens at 1:30 in the morning. Maybe pack it in a little bit. I understand you're young, have fun, but there is a certain level of making better decisions, which was Will Compton's point. Again, he's a young kid. He wants to have fun. He's at his college, like his college town, which Athens is very much a big college town. 4G day, excitement's high. I understand wanting to have fun, but also maybe be a little more thoughtful in your decision making. I think that's how I would best say it. Intentional, maybe, is a better way to say it. That's just where I'm at. But I do think overall, this seems like a nothing burger. I don't think it's going to really affect Zachariah Branch's draft stock, even though I do believe, if it were even slightly more serious, it could. But I think that this is basically a nothing burger because of what actually seems like it transpired in Athens that night when he was arrested. Gonna move on to our next topic, which is where's the money, Lebowski? Um, Ravens general manager Eric DeCosta was doing his pre-draft press conference, and he had some interesting things to say about the NIL era in college football. Essentially, what he said was NIL is leading to older college players entering the draft. And that's not, he said explicitly, that's not good for us, meaning NFL teams and decision makers. And it got my wheels turning. And I still stand by the fact that even though there needs to be more regulation, more guardrails put on NIL and the transfer portal and whatnot, and we are taking steps towards that for sure. No spring transfer portal is a big thing. I think that's a huge step in the right direction. Coaches seem to agree. Brent Key had some comments about that as well. Um, but I also think that it's like at its core, NIL is good for college football. It's good for the health of college football because in a pre-NIL era, Dante Moore's not coming back to Oregon. Arch Manning might not come back to Texas. Like there are decisions that are made in college football right now for in terms of players returning that we simply didn't see in a pre-NIL era. And for the sport of college football, I think that's a really, really good thing because we're keeping some of the best players in college football for longer. Seems like it'd be pretty good for the health of the sport. I guess what I hadn't thought about was the effect that that could have on the NFL, or at least how NFL decision makers would view that. In my opinion, like we know that breakout age and all these like buzzy draft terms are super important to a lot of NFL front offices. You want the upside. You want the guy who's already shown he could do it at 20 years old and now is going into the NFL at 21 years old, or a guy who is just turning 21 years old and only might be touching his potential. And you get to develop him before he even reaches his prime on a rookie contract. We know that NFL teams value that a great deal. But I also think that DeCosta might just be like a little sour grapes here, if I'm being completely honest about it. Um, I do think that while NFL decision makers value those things, that's not to say that you're not going to get a bad player because they're a year older. Like I don't think anyone's looking at. I'm trying to think of someone who's like a senior prospect. I'm totally again, my brain is fried. I apologize, guys. Um, but like you're not going to look at some of these guys who did maybe stay an extra year at college. They're still the same player that they were. And unless you're someone like a which I mean they couldn't have entered the draft last year, but like someone like TJ Parker or Peter Woods who goes to Clemson for the 2025 season and hurts their draft stock, like outside of that, if you go and you continue being the same player that you've always been, I don't understand why an NFL like decision maker is going to be completely deterred by the fact that, oh no, you get one less year in their early 20s. Like to me, that's just a little feels almost nitpicky to some degree. Um, and let's be clear, like though I do think regulations and guardrails, more of them are coming to NIL and college football. I also still definitely believe that it's not going anywhere. This is Pandora's box has been opened. We're not there. You can't close it. Can't put Pandora back in the box. You know what I mean? Um, but hopefully NFL decision makers like Eric DeCosta will adjust moving forward. Gonna stay on the topic of the draft with our next topick, which is do Haas or do Haas. Always feel weird doing this segment when it's just me and not me and Bueller, but nonetheless, I will answer the do Haas, which is should Jeremiyah Love go in the top five of the 2026 NFL draft? And before I give my answer, this stems from kind of the recent buzz that we've been hearing. Jeremiyah Love, I believe it was Todd McShay of The Ringer, and obviously formerly of ESPN, basically said that it's a lock that Jeremiyah Love will go in the top five picks. And the way he framed it was if the Cardinals don't take him at three, the Titans will take him at four. Um, I'm gonna go do Haas two S's. And part of this, admittedly, I'll admit this for like right up front, is draft brain. Draft brain, I like to define as just kind of the consensus thinking among draft analysts. I like to consider myself at least somewhat one of those. And the consensus is you shouldn't take a running back early in the NFL draft. And that's really what it boils down to. And Jeremiah Love is a phenomenal prospect. Some people have him as the number one prospect in the entire draft. I have him as the number two prospect. Fernando Mendoza still takes number one for me. Having said that, positional value is a thing. Positional value matters. And I think that when you look at the Cardinals and Titans specifically, I feel like taking Jeremiah Love in the top five would be a monstrous mistake. Did we not just see what happened with the Raiders and Ashton Genty? When you don't, I think the best way I've ever heard this framed when it comes to running backs is drafting a running back high isn't going to make a bad team good. We saw that with Ashton Genty, and I still believe Ashton Genty is a really damn good football player. And as the Raiders continue building, I also believe that Genty will start to shine a bit more. Doesn't mean that draft pick was necessarily worth it because you could have gotten to point B a little bit sooner had you been smarter with your draft strategy. But what a running back can do is take a good team to great or a middling team to good. But I don't think bad to good is what a running back is going to be able to do. That's what we're talking about when it comes to positional value. And the more I think about it, what's like how are the Cardinals and Titans any different from the Raiders last year? In the Titans case, you have a young quarterback in Cam Ward, but the offensive line's a question. The defense is still a question. You added a bunch of veterans. You have a new head coach. The weapons on the outside are leave a lot to be desired. I don't think Jeremiah Love is a real needle mover there, especially when you have a fine enough running back and Tony Pollard in the mix. Then on top of that, if you're talking about the Cardinals, well, God, they don't really know what their quarterback situation looks like for the future. Maybe it's Ty Simpson, who they've been connected to pretty heavily, but like even then, like the Cardinals are not close to competing for anything. This is a roster that is starting a new era, a new rebuild, essentially. And Jeremiah Love's not going to be a needle mover in that, especially when you have the chance to draft higher position needle movers in that spot or trade down. If you trade down and draft Jeremiah Love, then you can maybe talk me into that, getting more draft capital, more bites at the apple. But taking him third or fourth, I just can't get there. And that goes doubly so for the Giants at five if they were to take him, if that was a scenario that we were to get into. You have Scadaboo, and I'm not saying Jeremiah Love's not a better prospect than Cam Scadaboo. He definitely is. But I am saying that the Giants roster has a lot more needs than a running back who is a high end prospect when you already have a running back who's good enough. So we'll see if he ends up going top five. I will be harshly critical of it if he does go to the Cardinals or Titans, but we'll see how things play out for this draft class. We're going to move on to our next topic, bleh, which is that's my quarterback. Um, Another report that came out today was that Garrett Nussmeier's oblique injury that hindered him for much of his 2025 season. We heard all about it. Brian Kelly insisted that he was healthy throughout the entire time. I'm going to read this from Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. Former LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier underwent tests at the NFL Combine that revealed a cyst on his spine, the root cause of the persistent oblique pain that derailed his 2025 season, sources say. The cyst was pressing on a nerve, causing discomfort in Nussmeier's oblique. He has been asymptomatic since just prior to the Senior Bowl and all throughout the draft process. If that changes down the road, Nussmeier could undergo a minimally invasive procedure and miss just 2 to 3 weeks while stitches heal. Either way, doctors say there is no short or long-term risk for Nussmeier, who is projected to be a mid-round pick in this week's NFL draft. Brother, how can you insist this guy is healthy when he had a cyst on his spine that was causing the pain in his oblique? What the hell was Brian Kelly doing in Baton Rouge? Like, I just don't quite comprehend that. And like, I'm on record as being a fan of Garrett Nussmeier. I think he is a good quarterback. We obviously know that he has NFL coaching bloodlines that I do think will benefit him at the NFL level. Having said that, I also think that had Garrett Nussmeier gone anywhere else, somewhere where they actually cared about the player, somewhere where Brian Kelly wasn't the coach, he'd be in a lot better position than he is now, where you're talking about a third or fourth round pick. And I'm still a believer in Garrett Nussmeier. I think that at worst, you're going to get a backup who could be around for a decade in this league. But I think that there is upside that he could be a mid-tier starting quarterback. I don't think he's going to be the best quarterback in the league. Not getting over my skis there, but I do like Garrett Nussmeier. And the fact that this went undiagnosed, undiscovered, undisclosed, whatever term you want to use, for this long is an indictment on Brian Kelly and why he's no longer at LSU. I mean, I don't think anyone would ever mistake Brian Kelly for being the most caring individual. I don't think anyone would ever mistake Brian Kelly for being the most finger on the pulse guy that we've ever seen in most capacities. But for your quarterback, who you're asked about multiple times every week, to have something like this going on and you to essentially have no clue how to fix it, because again, if something were to like if he were to like when he was experiencing that, he could have undergone this procedure and missed 2 to 3 weeks. Instead, he just kept playing through it. And part of that, I'm sure, was Nussmeier's decision. I'm, trying to be a football guy and play through it. I understand that. Like, I'm not saying he's absolved of any part of that because I'm sure he was pushing for it as any competitor would. But also, if you're a coaching staff, you got to protect the player. You got to protect your kids. And God knows Brian Kelly wasn't doing that. So just baffling to me to see that. I will say also, playing through that, Garrett Nussmeier's a tough SOB, dude. He's a tough SOB. I'm rooting for him. I'm hoping he can get to put this behind him and, like I said, go on to have an NFL career of some sort, whatever that looks like. But going to finish up today's show with a slice of pumpkin pie, of course. Um, and I'm gonna go through just three guys who I would bet on in the 2026 NFL draft. One is a fringe first round pick, one is a day two pick, and the other one's probably a day three pick. We'll go in reverse order of that. We'll start with the day three pick. Le'Veon Moss out of Texas A&M. talent has never been the issue for Le'Veon Moss. Staying healthy is. And that's obviously going to be important at the NFL level. You want the guy to stay healthy if he's going to be toting the rock for you. I understand that. But in terms of his ability to play running back at a pro level, I think he's more than capable of that. I think he can go out there and take half the carries immediately if he is healthy. Um, we'll see where he ends up going, but I do think that Le'Veon Moss has a lot of traits that you really have to like in terms of an NFL caliber running back. Again, I don't think he's going to be a superstar. He's not Jeremiyah Love in terms of prospect evaluation by any stretch, but he's a guy who I'd be willing to bet on, especially with a day three pick, because let's be honest, when you get to day three, when you're talking about outside of the top 150, which is probably where Moss will go with the injury concerns, you're taking flyers. You're throwing darts at the board and hoping you hit a bullseye. Because hitting on late round picks with guys who can have meaningful impact on your football team, that's how you build something like really sustainable. You look at, I think one of the best examples is like the Legion of Boom Seahawks. You found a quarterback in Russell Wilson in the third round. Richard Sherman was a late round pick. Like you just had late round picks that kept hitting and they kept doing a great job of building that roster with late round picks. Ironically, they weren't particularly good when it came to early round picks, but regardless, it obviously resulted in quite a bit of success for that team. Um, and I think Le'Veon Moss is the type of player who could be a gem in that regard. On to the day two pick, man, I'm just betting on Jacob Rodriguez. He already answered a bunch of questions at the combine. There were a lot of people looking at him at Texas Tech, probably just looking at him as his build and stuff like that, and wondering if he was enough of an athlete to be able to compete at the NFL level. Um, he proved that he is more than good enough of an athlete to be able to do that. And when you combine more than adequate athletic ability with someone who is a leader, highly instinctual, and just has a nose for being around the play and making plays. Yeah, I'll take that on my defense at the NFL level. 100%, 100% of the time. And if you're a fan of a team that needs a linebacker, probably in the second round, um, I don't think you can do much better than Jacob Rodriguez. That's where I'm at with it. Um, and then we've talked about this guy before, but potential first rounder, maybe early day two, Akeem Mesidor. I understand he's 25 years old, and in terms of draft brain, that scares the bejesus out of me because, yeah, like I don't think there's much difference between a 21 and 22-year-old. And going back to Eric DeCosta's comments, 25 is a different story. 25 is pretty damn old to be going into the NFL draft. Having said that, I think this is a guy who has gone through a lot of changes in his career. I think he changed positions twice or three times in his college career, and he succeeded at a lot of those stops along the way and now has developed himself into a fully polished, fully formed edge rusher. Do I think he's going to be Myles Garrett? Do I think he's going to be TJ Watt, one of these elite edge rushers? Maybe not. Do I think he's a guy that can put up 8 to 12 sacks, maybe 8 to 10, and be a good run defender on top of that? Absolutely, I think he can do that. And you know what? In this draft class, where I think that there's a lot to like, but there are also quite a few less certainties than we're probably used to seeing, particularly in this range when we're talking about later first round, early second round. I'd bet on Akeem Mesidor, despite the age, because I think he's going to be able to come in and be an immediate impact guy. Maybe I'm wrong, been wrong before, but I don't think I'm very wrong with Akeem Mesidor. I think he's a good football player, and there are worse strategies than drafting good football players. There are also worse strategies in listening to this episode because this was episode 260 something. I'll figure it out. You'll see it in the description. You can follow me, Cody Williams, on Twitter, the X at the Sizzle20. You can follow John Buhler at Buhler118. You can follow the show at CFB False Start. Please like, rate, review, subscribe. Give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars on Spotify if you can. Give us a subscription on YouTube. We would really, really appreciate that. Leave us a comment. We would love to interact with you guys. Um, Bueller will be back, and our next episode will be a post first round, 3 yards at a cloud of punt, and we will get it done. But outside of that, I will see y'all then. Looking forward to looking forward to the draft and all that it will hold. And This is False Start.